Welcome to But What About Me, a career success podcast dedicated to giving a voice to underrepresented populations, or UPs, and helping each navigate their career to reach their highest potential. This podcast is brought to you by JenniferTardy.com. Hello there. Thank you for coming back for a brand spanking new episode of But What About Me. In today's episode, I get to chat with a workplace futurist, Marti Konstant. She was a delight to talk to and was just as enthusiastic about hopping on the line as I was about inviting her on the show. I learned about her work and passion through a friend of a friend, and I knew immediately that I wanted to have her here on the But What About Me podcast. But here's what I love so much about this. Now, whenever we come up with an episode theme, we always ask the question, but what about me? So even in Marti's topic of expertise, which is career agility, we took the same stance. What would my audience care about? And when I shared this with Marti, she was all in and committed to shaping today's theme, which ultimately turned the concept around and said, what if I want career agility, but I'm afraid of what it will mean for me, or what I would have to give up or sacrifice if I took on career agility. And so we opened up talking about the fears of career agility and misconceptions of what it actually means. So in addition to talking about this, we discuss what an agile career looks like, stages of careers where career agility should be activated, whether career agility is a skill or a muscle that needs strengthening, whether or not being agile can withstand failure, and how to have an agile mindset, whether you're a project manager or a cashier. And we talked about much, much, much more. I was such a student on this episode, everybody. You're going to see it in my questions, so I hope you don't mind. Okay, so let's talk about Marti for a bit. Our guest, Marti Konstant, researches how people respond and adapt to change in the workplace. As a top 19 career influencer, she has uncovered the one trait that helps you to flourish, not flounder, in your career. She encourages you to future-proof your career. She's a workplace futurist, keynote speaker, and best-selling author. Her core belief is adapt or die. Now, as a runner and mountain hiker across several continents, movement and mobility are central themes, yet there's one cherished moment that stopped her in her tracks. Check this out. Marti met and hugged a toddler panda in China, which is amazing. Now, I can't wait to jump right in, but before I do that, I'd be remiss if I did not remind you to check out our new career success mastermind, which is called Inner Circle. And Inner Circle not only offers a new way to think about career and life, it offers a new way to think about you. Whether you're betting on an employer or betting on yourself, let's level up together so that you can maximize your return. Inner Circle, if you're interested in it, visit JenniferTardy.com/IC for Inner Circle. Remember what I always say, if you hear this podcast episode and there's something that truly resonates with you, and you think you may know someone else that needs to hear it, snap a screenshot and share that episode on Instagram. And do not forget to tag us at Your Career Success. Guys, I am so super excited to introduce you to Marti. Let's get started. Well, welcome, Marti, and I appreciate you for being a part of the But What About Me podcast. How are you?
Jennifer, I'm so happy to be talking with you. I've been subscribing to your work, and I'm really excited for today's conversation.
I get so excited to talk about this as well, too. So today we're talking about career agility. And when when we were introduced, I was able to do a little more research on you and career agility in general. And I started thinking about, okay, I want her to be on the show. And what will my audience really need to know with this whole talk about career agility, because I think it's so important. And I started thinking about um, why people may fear career agility, especially as members of underrepresented populations, because my first notion was, and I hope that we're going to talk about it, of course. My first notion was agility means that, I could, go from here to there, be flexible. But to some people, let's say the veteran that's entering a workplace may be so used to structure, and so they don't want to rock the boat. Or the single working mom may say, wait a minute, I have too much to lose to take a risk in career agility. Or, the person with a disability may say, hey, I don't want to bring too much attention on me. Or even a person with a criminal record may say, like, I'm so happy that I got this job. I don't want to do anything to kind of shift that. But they may be missing out on something fantastic. And so I wanted to start off with my first question, now that we've kind of set up the context. What is career agility?
Yeah, and what you were just talking about, Jennifer, leads to some of the misconceptions about what being agile really is. If I
Okay.
take a definition that I put together a few years ago, is an agile career is a self-reflective, iterative career guided by responding to change, shorter tours of duty in a particular role, so evolving job roles, and designed to optimize creativity, growth, and happiness. So that's the long definition. The short definition is an individual who is able to respond to the changes in their department, in their industry, in their company in such a way that puts them in position for greater opportunities, either within that same company or within another company outside of the current job they have.
And both of those definitions just gave me goosebumps, because you're talking about reflection, you're talking about being happy, and you're connecting it to on the job, right? And so when you're thinking about an agile career, what are some of the misconceptions?
Well, some of the misconceptions are job hopping. When I give a presentation, I have a line of people that are in the millennial age group that want to talk to me because they say, you're speaking to my heart. This is what I'm going through. And it makes me feel good. But then we get further talking. And I interviewed for my book, I interviewed 1/3 millennials, 1/3 Gen Xers, and 1/3 boomers, about 120 people. And
Awesome.
I really got inside the mind of the different age groups. And what I found is agility is more of a mindset that is not germane to a generation, but more to an individual. So once people figure out, oh, maybe I don't have to leave, maybe I can make that opportunity for myself within the same organization, but in a different role, there's a little less pressure to always be moving. But there's also nothing wrong if you've got the guts and the smarts and the abilities to secure another role. Absolutely have at it on the open market. But if you want to be a little bit more cautious and maybe a little bit more strategic within an organization to gain that valuable expertise, there's lots of things you can do.
Okay. So one of the things that you had mentioned earlier is that um, is so I hear the word move, which and I love the way that you frame it up. You can move within your job, within your department, within the company, or if you wanted to move outside of the company, right? Which goes back to, what if I'm afraid to move because I'm afraid it's going to rock the boat? Why is career agility important to have? Why should I risk rocking the boat for agility? Why is it important?
Right. And I love the fact that you bring up fear. We all have it. And I would suggest to turn the fear into curiosity.
Oh, let's
It's
talk
not a
about that.
risk to do that. And one of the principles of the Agile career, there's 7 of them. One of them is to pursue it in parallel. It's not risky to take an online course in the evening. It's not risky to have a very highly strategic lunch or coffee break with an influential person. There's a lots of things you can do on the side. You can pursue a hobby to, broaden your network. You can take a class. You can take a free class. You can take a paid class. You can get a certification. Then there's also this idea of, oh, maybe I need a little extra money. What is it that I can do on the side? I can't tell you how many times I've gotten into a Lyft or an Uber, and the person that is taking me around also has a full-time job in another business, or they're a student. So they're using that, they're pursuing something on the side in a way that fortifies their lifestyle.
So career agility is sort of like keeping yourself competitive. Is that where we're headed?
You're taking me in a great state. I love that way that I love talking to people because they have a perspective. I talk about maintaining relevance.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good.
So keeping yourself competitive is really a smart thing to do. And it's a smart thing to do throughout your career. So the more skills that you absorb and make yourself better at, the more valuable you are within your own organization. If they're an enlightened organization, they'll see that. And if you say, gee, I'm working in this department, but that department over there, I think that my talents would be better suited there. There's things that you could do by talking to some other people within the organization that work in that department. Get some advocates for your cause. Maybe take an extra course or an online certification and bring it to your organization. Say, I've done this, this, and this, and speak often about what it is that you're doing and what you're curious about. If you're running marathons on the weekend, bring it to work and talk about it. People will find that interesting.
Why do you think people hide all of the things that they're doing, not even just to benefit themselves, but not even just to intentionally benefit themselves, but things that benefit them? Does that question even make sense?
It makes a lot of sense because, you're developing a brand. I'm developing a brand. We all know how important brand development is in our career, but I don't think we're wired that way. Unless you're a celebrity and you're famous, you kind of think, well, should I really call attention to what it is that I'm doing? And the answer is absolutely yes, not in a bragging sort of way, but let people know what you're doing. People are interested in your hobbies. In fact, people are more interested in your hobbies than they are in your job.
Right. In your
Right.
actual expertise, they're more interested in knowing
Right.
everything
So
else about
if
you.
you talk about a hobby, and oh, by the way, your boss's boss also does that on the side as a hobby, they will find you very interesting, and you will be more top of mind in that organization. If you become a multi-dimensional being in the organization, you're
Huh.
more valuable.
So it's like a holistic way of staying relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Not just, and I want to make sure that anyone who listens to this gets it, that it's not just staying relevant in your skill set or your expertise, but it's thinking about yourself 360 and staying relevant, correct?
Right.
For the organization or for your career path in general.
Right. And I'd like to address your question again about why is it that people might not feel as comfortable? I
Please.
think this is a learning moment for people to get comfortable with building their personal brand. Every single person within any organization needs to build a personal brand. What does a personal brand mean? It means letting everyone know what you're best at. And when you're first building a personal brand, you become the go-to person within the organization for one thing. Of course, you can do 5 things. Of course, you can do 10 things. But the important thing is become known for one thing. Why do you do that? Everyone in the company will know you then. And then once they know you, they'll know the multi-dimensional being that you are, and they will start to work with you with those other skills.
Wow. Okay. Okay. And so it also sounds like it doesn't matter it doesn't matter how you came into the organization. Now you're here, and now regardless, you should begin thinking about career agility. Did I pick that?
Exactly.
Okay.
And what's interesting about this, if we apply the word tech to anything we're doing, it could be health tech, fintech, the financial tech, marketing tech. 5 to 10 years ago, tech wasn't added to all of these professions. Now it's AI. Now it's all these other things, this artificial intelligence. So if you add this to what it is that you're doing and become interested in that, and in a meeting talk about, I was wondering the other day how artificial intelligence is going to impact our function. You can be even an administrative assistant or an executive assistant and still have that same question in a meeting that will enhance your status as a smart human being that is curious about what's happening and how things out there are affecting things inside here.
And I can easily see how that can affect your brand too. If you're then seen as the go-to person because of a natural curiosity that you decided to dive a little bit further into. So speaking of, we were just talking about administrative assistants or executive assistants. At what stage in your career should you activate agility? Is there a stage?
The stage happens while you're in training.
Oh, okay.
So and I say training because training can be at the beginning of your career, it can be in the middle of the career. It could be when you are getting some type of certificate, some sort of training to do what you're doing right now. I often talk about it. Let's take the example of a college degree. If you're, working at a junior college, what you're doing while you're in school, you're going through a design thinking process where what is it that I'm good at? What do I want to do? You create a career hypothesis, what industry do I want to work in? Maybe I don't care about the industry. Maybe it's just the function. And then eventually you get to that starting point, and 80% of the people I interviewed said that they got the job they could get out of training. Not necessarily the job that they were going towards, because they don't necessarily know exactly what they want until they see it. Even doctors and surgeons end up navigating differently, but they're an example of a very narrowly focused. But most of the rest of us get a general education with some type of specialty, and then there's 25 to 100 different roles that we could handle. So we don't really know where to start. In marketing, you could start in research, or you could start as an account exec at a public relations firm. 2 very different roles.
So are you saying that you should just be okay, that you're okay if you're entering the market the career market in a generalized area, because that does allow you to be more flexible? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that, and I am saying that it's okay, another principle, to A/B test your career. You get in a role. You could A/B test between roles, or you can look at your career over the past 10 years and say, I've held 3 distinct roles. Where was I happiest? It's okay to go back and sideways to get to where you want to get. But you don't know until you try. I had a friend that started out in PR, and I thought, oh, she's the account exec. She's an extrovert. Like, that's what she's going to do. She's going to be the person on the account. Do you know what she went into and what she became a specialist in?
Let's see.
Research. Online research. She became an expert at monitoring online conversations. She became the expert at working on the account team to help close business because of how effective their research techniques were. I just never would have thought that. And I don't know if she would have thought of that. But that was the job she got when she was an intern.
And there's such a mindset shift in this, which is why I'm so enjoying this conversation, because most people are in a career and they're thinking, I have to, dig my heels in the mud for this career because I've invested so much in it. But what you're saying is that it's okay to be open. And is that where the reflectiveness comes in?
Right. That's I say a self-reflective career because it's the same thing about being a good human being or just in our personal life. We are not happy unless we know ourselves. And it's probably the hardest thing any of us will do in an entire lifetime is understand who we are and what motivates us. And we need to go back to this over and over and over again. And once you know yourself a little bit more, you'll make wiser choices. You still have a lot more to learn. And I used to say to my dad, like, what are you interested and curious about? And he said that he never, ever wanted to stop learning. And that was one of the things when I interviewed him for a family project, that this whole sense of learning and reading and doing all the time until you discover who you are. So he was still learning who he was in his 70s. And I thought, wow, that's really cool.
And even speaking of dads, I just recently had a conversation with my dad, and I was like, Dad, now that you've retired, like, what is your passion? Like, what do you want to do? And he said something that kind of made me give him a double take, but it resonated so much. He was like, all I really want to do is tinker. Like, I enjoy tinkering with stuff, like tinkering with fixing things around the house or tinkering with cars. And I was like, that is an amazing passion to know that, like, that is where you feel like you are at your best, when you tinker and you create something amazing, but he can be flexible to go from the home to the car to the landscaping to internally within the home. Mm-hmm. He just liked to tinker. Isn't that an example of agility?
That's an example of agility, and it's an example of curiosity. Mm-hmm. And it's an example, and I don't know exactly what he did while he was working a day job, but I'll bet you that he found certain opportunities along the way where it could be a type of tinkering. If you're exploring new technology, it's a new toy, right? If you're exploring something new in your role, that is a type of tinkering and exploration, like, oh, how does this work?
Okay. So is agility a skill?
Agility is a type of capability that one can learn.
I like it.
You could call it a skill, but it's also a characteristic. I think people that are inherently curious are agile right out of the gate. I have an agility meter that's in my book, and in interviewing people, they fall here as a steadfast personality or up here as 100% agile, right? And we're all somewhere in between. So some people are more naturally agile. So the higher your curiosity quotient, the more agile you probably are.
I like it. I'm very curious, Marti.
Yeah. Yes.
In general. So you've mentioned your book. I'd love to talk about your book. Can you tell us the name of the book? And then you mentioned 7 components or 7 concepts. I'd love to hear about that.
Right. So the name of the book is Activate Your Agile Career: how responding to change will inspire your life's work. It actually, I always have it here.
Love
Looks like
it.
this. And the principles, it would be, incredibly crazy to go into all of them. But I mentioned 2 of the principles, actually 3 of them, because one of them is responding to change. One of them is pursuing it in parallel, so pursuing side gigs, side projects, pursuing your curiosity. One is activating your feedback squad. We all think that we want a perfect mentor that's 10 to 15 years older that's going to be this perfect advocate for us. Guess what? I never found one. So what I did along the way, and what you probably did as well, you find situational advisors. You found a colleague or a friend, like, I've got this problem. Can you help me with it? Help me brainstorm some solutions here. Or you might find someone that will help you when you're pursuing a certain type of role and you need some advice. So that's 3 of them. A/B testing is another one. I always have, this is actually a fun diagram that is in the book, that the things that I drew, these models that I drew. But responding to change, thinking about your career as a series of projects as another one. Because when you take on a project, you're really energized, engaged, excited. And the idea is to be like a surfing wave where you can keep on going instead of getting bored. That's another problem we all have, is we get bored with the repetition. Another one is keep an idea zone. So, whether you call it a vision board or a place where you keep ideas about your personal and professional life and your industry, whether you write it down on a notebook or in a, an online program like Evernote, be like software engineers. They take their good ideas and they create a place for those ideas that they nurture and come back to at a later time if they're still relevant. And when you're really having a tough day at work, no problem. I'm going to go back to my idea zone and my ideas, and I'm going to feel better about this job when I go home that night.
That is pretty cool. So I really like that concept of thinking about your jobs as projects along the way too. So I'll make sure that in the summary section of this podcast that I put your book in there too, in case people want to see all 7 concepts and things, because they sound amazing. And thank you for sharing some of them as well too. So let's connect this to your resume. How can you showcase an Agile career in your resume? And do you recommend trying to showcase it, or is it something more personal?
I think there's this question is so loaded. I just talked to someone yesterday that specializes in helping people get jobs, and talking about how it's not necessarily the resume, but that's another discussion. But what you're specifically saying is, what can I reflect in my resume that will make people more curious and interested about me? And that is about reflecting your competencies and capabilities. We hear a lot these days, it's not necessarily about the title, it's about what is it that you're capable of doing. There's a lot of emphasis these days of hiring people that are capable of doing something versus looking at what they've done as a title. So that's one way of looking at it. So I think a skills-based approach to resume building would be a great opportunity. But more important than that is making certain that we avail ourselves to the things outside of what is the system for resumes? It's the ATS, whatever.
The applicant tracking
system. You feed them in, because you've worked in HR. So that you feed them in, like, what is it that I can do to make certain that I'm not just an electronic piece of data within an organization to get that. So the resume becomes less important than the network and the network you don't know, because it takes networking with strangers to get really great roles. So it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do, but it's the only way that I've managed to, remain relevant for decades, even working in Silicon Valley for a year and a half. I
Okay.
didn't feel overwhelmed about like, oh, well, gee, everyone's like 20 years old. I didn't feel like that because my skills were in hot demand.
I like that. I like that a lot. And so let's talk about an agile career and salaries. Now, in what ways can being agile affect your salary? Is it positive, negative? Yeah, in what ways?
I can speak to my own experience about that.
Okay.
So of my generation, a lot of people didn't move a lot. I moved sometimes 3 years, sometimes 5 years, sometimes 7 years, but my cohort was staying in jobs for 10 to 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I used, and I think it's still true today, holding different roles enables you to make salary jumps. When you stay in the same thing, totally obvious, you're going to get the 3% increments. But looking at what it is that you're curious about, what you're talented in, I'm not suggesting that you go into something that you don't like just for the money. It had to be something that you like. And with my own career, I've navigated in such a way where the salary increases were pretty, sometimes surprising, like remarkable. Yet I know if I had stayed in the same role, I would never have had that opportunity. And some of it did require going to a different company to get that. But sometimes it's not. It's, people see the value in this curious, hardworking person that's a lot of fun to be around, and you are promoted. I mean, you've worked in HR. We all know that there's a lot of people with potential, high potential, medium potential, and it's incumbent upon people within the organization to identify those people and retain them. Our unemployment level is so low right now. So retaining these good people is really important to the leadership of the company.
Right. No, I agree. And I really liked how you set it up, even with your own story about you may have been in a job for 3 years, maybe 5 years, maybe 7 years. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to job hop, because that's still showing a lot of loyalty. And you're saying, but still think about it this way. You do get bigger jumps in salary increases if you are agile. And being on the recruiter end, being on the HR end, for the last 15 years or so, that is exactly the pattern that I've seen. And I tell clients a lot that the more loyal, the longer you stay in a specific position, 10, 15, 20 years, you're probably not making what you should be making in that position. So you should check. You should always check to see. So that makes complete sense on how it affects your salary.
Right, because it indicates growth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
People care, managers and leaders care about growth because that's what they want their company to do.
That's right. That's right. So does agility come from experience over time? It sounds like you're saying it's a muscle that you need to build.
It is a muscle that you need to build. Some people are naturally agile, but I think it's a very low percentage, probably under 10% are naturally agile, and the rest of us can build it. And actually, it's a mandate right now because I use this quote all the time: the half-life of education, the returns to education, whatever we're getting trained on, used to be like 20 years. Now it's less than 4 or 5.
Really?
So yes, and this is research driven. And what that means is I would like to say, we all have the opportunity to be nonstop learners. In the past, there was a lot more repetition in what people did in their roles. But our economy, our company structure, everything is changing so much. We know every 10 years, there's a new technology that just revolutionizes everything we're doing. I mean, in my entire career, I can't even believe the things that have changed. And if you read any of the books, the futurist books, it's like within 10 years, an entire lifetime passes before us.
That's true.
Like we never would have imagined what we're doing right now 10 years ago. We never would have imagined it.
I mean, even look at all that we're doing with data. Like you have this whole new population of skilled people who understand how to read data and visualize data, and they're just data scientists. And you didn't hear as much about having data scientists 10 years ago. You didn't hear a lot about AI 10 years ago. I mean, there's just goodness. You are absolutely right. I can see what you were saying about the half-life of education. That makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about failure. Does building an agile career mean that I need to just be completely comfortable with failure and that it could happen? Because now you're taking more risks.
I think if you assume that taking a risk will be dramatic failure, that might be a yes. But how I would answer that is I talk a lot about incremental change.
Okay.
And so that if you tackle things, we were talking about, single moms, I think earlier, people, I've talked with people that or someone who's putting their kid through college, they can't risk rocking the boat in a particular role. But if they can make some incremental changes along the way or incremental learning, you don't have to do this overnight. You don't have to pressure yourself, but you can cultivate this new type of learning on the side. And then within 2 years, 3 years, you've got something incredibly fashioned that's very marketable. And because we don't want people to think that if they experiment that they're going to fail. It's not like a technology experiment. It's either, you win big, you lose big. It can be incremental career change. It doesn't have to be dramatic.
And so I get what you mean by incremental learning. Can you give an example of what an incremental change could look like?
A change could be, say there's a new technology system that's being implemented within the organization, and we're all groaning and thinking, oh my gosh, we have to learn one more thing. An incremental change for a person could be like they're trying to assemble a team, a cross-functional team to make this successful, maybe ambassadors. It's raising your hand and saying, I'll help. You know what you do by raising your hand with a cross-functional team? You're building a relationship with a cross-functional team. You're saying that I will be the ambassador for our department for this initiative. And it's scary because you don't even know if this new technology is going to be really fully adopted by the organization. Usually the IT department, if they've made the decision, they're making 110% commitment to it. So you're going to be relatively safe. So that's a little bit of a risk. But there's all kinds of change, but incremental change is responding to change. I say this one thing: don't do nothing when change is afoot. When change is around you, don't do nothing. It could be a promotion. Don't sit there and feel good about your promotion. Figure out what it is that you're going to do to make your mark.
Okay.
Can't do nothing.
I like that a lot. So it's easy to see how agility can work for someone who may be like a project manager but what if a person is, let's say, a cashier? How can career agility apply to a cashier?
I think a career agility is doing your job really well and then some.
I like it.
I will take it to the example of the cashier at Whole Foods. I purposely go out of my way to go to this one cashier because he talks with me. He knows I live in the neighborhood. He's always happy. He just says, how is your day going? How is this great day going? You ask him about his life, he responds the same way. He'll talk about the Super Bowl, whatever he's doing. And it's like, I go out of my way. I got to think that Whole Foods knows that he's doing that.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like going above and beyond.
Right? I mean, it's like a really special experience. We are part of the experience economy. Any person that can lend positive experience to the customer or to their colleagues is perceived as a higher potential person within the organization.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So, what if you work at a place that isn't open to new approaches? How does being agile show up in that situation?
I think being agile could be making certain that you're addressing your own curiosity and your own hobbies and your own creativity and working within the constraints that you have. Some people are stuck in their role because their boss likes what they do
Yeah.
and they want
Yeah.
them to stay in that role.
Hmm.
But one of the strategies in something like that, if you wanted to stay in the same organization, is to start talking to get advice from some other leaders, not behind your boss's back, but from some other leaders and say, I have this idea and I think there's this problem in the department and it's just missing and there's a gap and I think I could help. So start to talk to some other people within the organization and then start to talk with your boss and say, I think there's a problem here and I think I can help with it. And just do this gradually and you might find yourself with a new opportunity in a new role. And the second answer to that question is the boss may be a jerk,
Hmm.
right? And you really are stuck. Then it's time to start looking at all the things that you could be doing and to navigate either within the same company, because there might be another person in the company that just adores you, just loves your work ethic.
Yeah.
And so you have that option, but you also have the option to ignite your network to see if there's other opportunities.
Okay. Okay. And so now let's talk about being on a team. How does agility play itself out, or the mindset of agility play itself out when you're within a team dynamic?
Well, there's something called, agility in teamwork. So we're talking a lot about career agility and how an individual. There's also company agility, the things that they need to do to stay relevant in the industry. Well, team agility actually preceded career agility and a lot of other things. Agile teams exist today to build software and to build technology solutions. There's a change happening right now where agile innovation is extending to the rest of the organization. I noticed it in software teams where they would get together, they'd have these stand-up meetings, they'd be standing in a circle to address some of the current issues. It wasn't a report for the week, it was actually just to say, how's the software release going, what are the issues we need to move along, and everyone knew what was going on. They were collaborative. They also worked with the rest of the organization to help other people in other departments, say it's marketing or HR, like this is what we're doing. So it's this getting input from other parts of the organization and collaborating with their team. So being agile is being responsive to change. I use software development as an example because they are always responding to change by putting
Yes,
in a
they
new
are.
feature.
Yes, they are.
They talk about iterative.
Uh-huh.
Software releases used to be one big software release. Now it's like one change after another. How often do
Uh-huh.
you get that thing on your computer screen saying, you need to update this? That's
Yes,
because they
I'm
just made
always.
a change. It's kind of irritating, but it's making our software safer and it's
Yeah.
making it more powerful.
Okay. All right. So, I want to know, are there any other tips, maybe something that I didn't bring up that you really want to make sure that this audience hears as it relates to career agility? What else do you have?
Well, I would say this. In some of your materials, you talked about people being afraid of adapting or getting left behind. So adapt or get left behind. It's a Darwin type phrase, survival of the fittest. I would say if people can start to think about adapt or die,
Yeah.
is what it is. If you're not, there's a movie that talks, if you're not busy living, you're
Busy
dying,
dying.
kind of thing. Yeah. So really, Shawshank Redemption, just a classic movie. But that phrase has been used in a variety of TV shows, in different variations on that phrase. If you're not growing, you're dying. And I would say to think about three things. Optimize your creativity. That'll make you happy. Optimize your happiness and optimize your growth. If you are doing those three things, you are going to be highly relevant, and people are going to want to retain you or hire you.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. And I am so appreciative that you've taken some time out to be on this show today. So let me ask you, where can people find you on the internet, and what are you up to in your world these days?
Well, they can find me on the internet at agilecareer.com. Just all one word. And what I'm up to these days is I studied individuals. I called it the Agile Careerist Project. That's how I created the book. It took me 6 years to do all that and to finally launch it. And now I'm working on a project called Happy, Profitable Employees, understanding that there's two sides to the equation. There's the corporate piece and there's the individual piece. We both have to be profitable to succeed. And then the other thing I'd like to offer your viewers here is I have a free agility guide, 22-page career agility guide that anybody can have access to. You just have to go to that agilecareer.com, and the career agility guide icon is there.
Awesome. And all of the information that you're sharing with me, I'm going to make sure it goes in our summary section too, especially the free guide, because I know that people love seeing things like that. And thank you for sharing that gift with us too. So I'm going to do the same thing with you that I do with the rest of my guests, which are flash questions. So I'm going to ask 3 questions, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to mind for you, okay?
Now I'm really fearful.
No pressure. Okay, so the first question, it's never too late to
explore.
I like it. Number 2, I get inspired by
running.
Awesome. And number 3, career success means
being happy in your own skin.
That was such a great way to close out the show. Thank you, Marti, for being on the show. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Jennifer. It was great.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. Be sure to tune in next week because we have so much more in store for you. Until next time, keep going, keep growing, and keep glowing.